Two monks lived in a forest in solitude, unaware of each other. There was a monkey in that forest who, like all her kind, loved to mimic and make faces. One day, these monks met and started talking. Turned out they lived in the same forest, and both recalled the monkey. When they talked about her, it seemed they were speaking of entirely different monkeys. However, when they described her features, it became clear they were talking about the same one, as all the details matched. The first monk said that when he retreated to the forest, the monkey there started harassing him, disrupting his prayers, stealing food, and throwing coconuts. In response, he threw stones at her and yelled, trying to drive her away. She was a real menace, not a monkey. My experience was entirely different, said the second monk. Although I remember she behaved as you described it first, I considered it normal and sometimes fed her, thinking she stole food because she was hungry and made faces and noises because that was her nature. When she screamed, I didn't respond but continued praying. I don't know what happened, but over time she became calmer, stopped screaming, throwing coconuts, and stealing. Often, when I prayed, she would sit quietly next to me, trying to mimic me. In the evenings, she brought bananas, coconuts, and mangoes for dinner, and when it was cold, she collected dry branches for the fire. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. If we act this way, we will bring many people to the Lord, as we will be an example for them. If an animal responds to kindness, how much more so will a person? This story illustrates two different approaches to difficult situations or relationships, whether with a monkey or with people. The first monk chose to use force and opposition toward the monkey that disrupted his solitude. He responded to her harassment aggressively, throwing stones and yelling at her, hoping to drive her away. However, this approach only escalated the conflict and did not solve the problem. The second monk took a different path. He began to see the monkey's behavior as a natural reaction and decided to treat her with kindness and patience. Instead of responding to her screams and antics with irritation, he continued to pray and occasionally fed her. Over time, the monkey began to mimic his calmness and even helped him by gathering firewood and bringing food. This example underscores the power of kindness and consistency in good deeds. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This phrase highlights that kindness can overcome negative circumstances and change even the most challenging situations. It inspires us to set an example of kindness, which can lead to positive change in the world around us and attract others to good deeds. If you are interested in stories, subscribe to the channel. Please share this story with a loved one. Thank you for your attention. Once, two monks, a master and his disciple, were sent with a message to a neighboring monastery. The journey was long, about 2 days, so the monks set off at dawn. The monastery where they lived was known for its strictness and asceticism. In addition to the usual monastic restrictions, they were forbidden to use any form of transportation. They walked everywhere, ate mainly vegetables and bread, and only on holidays were allowed to have fruits, fish, cheese, and eggs. They were very reserved, not taking anything from the worldly life. As for carnal pleasures, they didn't even think about them. They did not touch women, did not talk to them, and tried not to look at them. The monks walked silently and almost without stopping. Near noon, the master stepped off the road, and the disciple followed him. The master took off his satchel, placed it under a tree, and went to a stream to quench his thirst. After drinking water, the monks sat under the tree to eat bread and rest a little from the scorching sun. Not half an hour passed when the elder monk got up, took his satchel, and headed back to the road. The young disciple had no choice but to follow silently. Several more hours passed. The monks continued walking in silence, passing other travelers and refusing all offers for a ride, whether from a farmer on a cart, an old lady in a pickup truck, or a truck driver. The sun was already setting when the monks approached a narrow section of the road between two small lakes. This section, about 8 to 10 meters long, was flooded, likely after recent heavy rains. The water was shallow, about 20 centimeters deep. As they approached this section, the young monk noticed a beautiful young woman standing hesitantly at the water's edge. He immediately looked away and recited a prayer, remembering the monastery's rules. When the monks reached the water's edge, the woman unexpectedly asked for their help. She requested to be carried across the flooded section, as she didn't want to dirty her dazzling white shoes. The young monk was about to explain to this frivolous lady who they were and why they couldn't fulfill her request when suddenly the master picked her up and silently carried her across the flooded section. On the other side, he put her down without a word, continued his journey, ignoring her thanks and not looking back at the young monk. The young monk, in complete confusion, hurried after the master. He couldn't comprehend what had happened. It turned out that the master had held this woman with one arm around her waist and the other, oh God, under her bare knees. What is happening? How is this possible? He touched her. He felt her skin. He breathed in her scent. But he is the master. Impossible. Unthinkable. Such or similar thoughts did not leave the young monk's mind until darkness fell. Finally, the master stopped again. It was time for the night rest. The master chose a tree, lay down under it, put his satchel under his head, and immediately fell into a deep sleep. The young monk lay next to him but couldn't sleep. Only by morning did he manage to doze off. Almost at the same time, he felt the master's touch on his shoulder and heard the single word, time. The young monk got up with difficulty and followed the master with heavy steps. His thoughts immediately returned to yesterday's incident. He wanted to ask the master why he had done it, why he had broken the monastery rules, why he had touched the woman. But he remained silent, knowing that the monastery rules did not allow the younger monks to speak to the elders first. Thus, they walked in silence, the tireless master ahead and the confused and exhausted young monk behind. When they stopped for the next night rest, the master, seeing the concern on the young monk's face, asked what was troubling him. The young monk confessed his confusion, his guesses, and his thoughts about the incident with the woman. The master listened attentively, paused for a moment, and then said, "I carried the woman and forgot about it, but you are still carrying her in your mind.